Hey, pues net new video. This one I'm back into doing medicine now. Yay! What's going on? I'm on to an RN. You're supposed to be an RN, not a ham. Anyway, this will be the new series, new month, new series. Like I said before, the lab one I kind of put it on hold because I want to do more research and get the idea a little bit more clear, and I'm waiting for some stuff that I order to come in. And I want to start this series with talking about trauma. And there's a lot of videos out there on trauma and self-reliance, and almost all of it is about that. But I want to start that first video because of that. So myth versus reality. Maybe myth is a little bit a harsh word because a lot of those concepts are not really myth. It's just a little bit kind of, in my opinion, misguided or misdirected, because they're, how can I say that? They kind of apply to a situation that the rules would change, and those concepts that you apply on it would change. So what I mean by that is that when the grid is up, so let's say you got in a car accident tomorrow or today or something, and they rush you to the emergency. When you come to the emergency, the grid is up. We stabilize you, we send you to the OR. A lot of trauma care is based on, let's get you as fast as we can to the OR or to an intensive care. Then the trauma care kind of really take place. But the whole point of before that, so the ICU and the OR, depending of what kind of case you have, it's all about stabilizing. It's about stopping the bleeding, and that's it. So a lot of the kids that I see out there, and I'll talk a little bit about those myths, is that it's about that. But in a self-reliance situation where you need to take care of somebody in trauma, first of all, a lot of those people you won't be able to save. And I don't know why every time I see, or a lot of time when I see videos, it seems like this is not talked about. And it is a big reality that we need to start facing. We won't be able to save everyone. The care that we have today won't be able to save everyone like we are right now, no matter what kit you have and stuff, because we're going back to the care of 1900, at the beginning of the century or mid-century if you want to, but that's the reality. And the reality is that people were dying of simple things that we can help now and keep them alive, but they will die because you won't have the care that we have. You won't have all the professional that we have. You'll be in your home, house, community, whatever, trying to do your best, but there's a lot of things you'll be limited. And even battlefield medicine is quite an advance, because now with helicopters and airplanes, people can, like, for example, from Afghanistan, they're stabilized at the scene, and then they're transported to, for example, Germany, and from Germany they're flown back to the countries. So there's a lot of cares that happens outside that. So a lot of the cares that we will have to do lawfully, it's more what we would find in developing countries. That's more like probably closer to the statistic of things like 80 and things like that. And even that, when you talk, if you look like Doctor Without Borders, World Health Organization, they have a lot of supplies. Their kits sometimes can hold on for 10,000 people. They're all gathered around. They can bring them by airplanes. So there's a whole supply that you won't have. No matter how well stocked your room is, there's some supplies that you cannot have. So this is the first reality of it that I would want to bring. So let's go about 6 different myths that I want to kind of concentrate on, and then in future videos I'll kind of touch a little bit more. The first one I really want to talk about is the kits themselves. A lot of people, what they sell out there for the self-reliance are trauma kit. Great, but limited. The reason is they're limited is because trauma kits are oriented, like we were saying, stop the bleeding. Very important to stop the bleeding. But what are you going to do after? How are you going to take care of the wounds? How are you going to manage this? Which wound can you manage? How are you going to manage all the blood loss? And what are you going to do after the blood loss has stopped? Those are the questions that your kit that you're going to do needs to address. And a lot of kits that I see out there are more oriented towards ambulance kits or battlefield kits. Great, but again, those kits were built for having something else. So if you're going in an ambulance, all this stuff so let's say you're able to get an ambulance. The ambulance is set up so that it can bring somebody to the emergency. The emergency is set up so that we can bring somebody to the OR or the ICU. They're not meant for them to stay days on or weeks long in the emergency. All the kits that we have is made for that. But when you talk about self-reliance, that's what you need to do. You need to be able to hold this person a week, 2 weeks, take care of it, so that they can continue their journey, or you're able to evacuate them or something. But that's the kit. So a lot of the trauma kits that I see out there, they're built for short-term traumas. And yes, the big bleeders and stuff, that's important to have, but those are small kits, so you don't need to buy the big trauma kit for it. A very small kit that you can just do, like decompression of the chest and the short things that we need to do, just like an ambulance would do great. But the other kits that sometimes I see, $400, $500, all full of things. Yeah, but there's nothing for wound cares, which would be the big one. Nothing for long-term fractures, which I don't see. So a lot of the kits out there, just be careful when you buy them. I think they have a lot of gear, looks like it, but it's all oriented towards the same goal, which is stabilization. But in self-reliance, we're not talking just about stabilization, we're talking about care after that. And again, based on that, a lot of those people may die. The percentage of survival will be dropped down from, so if you have an amputation, for whatever reason, a shotgun or got caught or something like that, the chance of it to survive right now with the grid up, pretty good. I mean, you go straight, we stabilize the blood and we stop, and then we can transfuse you in the hospital and we can bring you up to the OR, close that up and everything. In a self-reliant situation, that same statistic, that same wound, quite different, and that same injury, quite different than because you're taking care of them at home. So that's the first myth. The second one, IV fluid. Everybody always talks about, oh, I need to start an intravenous and give fluids, an intravenous and give fluids. The first problem with this is IV fluids do not provide any oxygenation whatsoever. Any substance, they're all what we call crystalloid. And crystalloid is because you can see through it. Colloid are all blood products or component like albumin and everything. And even those, there's some statistic that are starting to show that, especially in the albumin, probably not what we thought it was useful for. So the only product that you can really give that can makes a difference is blood. And even blood, the transfusion, you have to be careful, because a lot of the transfusion, for example, when you go, if you ever had a transfusion, when you go to the hospital, they'll give you different product, because when you give blood at the blood bank or something, they take your whole blood. But from that whole blood, they do different components. They separate your red blood cells, they separate your platelets, they separate the plasma, they separate all those things to give different products. So for the 1 unit you give, maybe 6 or 7 units are taken out of that to go for 6 or 7 different people. When you look at studies, for example, in the Army, is what they call 1-to-1, meaning that they even have what they call walk-in blood banks, is that everybody has their blood type, and if you're B positive and the other one is B positive, they take the blood out of one person and they give it to the other person, again, for stabilization. So because they have the capacity for that, they have the checking the reaction for bloods and stuff, it can transfusion. So IV fluid may not be the best answer. First of all, hard to maintain, and I did videos about that in the past. Hard to maintain, but also because if you give too much, there's some studies now, and I've shown as well, that it can worsening the condition. There's increased mortality with it, especially if you give a lot of fluids. I just read one now. It was a 5% increase in the mortality by every 100 milliequivalent change in the sodium. That was IV transfusion, IV fluid transfusion only, not no blood or stuff. So IV fluids, a lot of people thought, oh, I'll start with intravenous and give it. It's not the solution. A lot of the concentration, the cheap one that we can give, especially in normal saline, is not a good concentration for the vein. So IV fluid is not what the holy grails that everybody talks about. It's very controversial and a lot of things, and a lot of people are starting to go away from it. They're starting to go more through other mix like plasma-lyte, ringer lactate, for like dehydrations and stuff. And even that, there's some case drinking water is better. So IV fluids, not what everybody talks about, not the big hypes, and you still have to have the skills and the gear and the equipment to start that IV, and it becomes pretty expensive. So unless you have a community and a nice place to store all that stuff, not a great add-on to your kit.